Well, let's get into situation in the Middle East.
You said, according to two military sources that you've spoken to, they are telling you that the United States of America is loading up on firepower in order for a huge bombing campaign against Iran. This is in the middle of ceasefire negotiations.
Yes, I obviously can't talk about those sources. I don't want to put anybody at risk. But, I honestly don't really need those sources. That just kind of corroborated, because we can see all kinds of information about, everything from tail information on the airplanes that are flying back and forth, C-17, C-5, C-130s. They've been flooding through the region all during the time of this. I call it more a pause than a ceasefire because
yeah, it's a pause.
The Iranian side's doing the same thing. I also have some information from that side that they're openly preparing as well. So I think that all sides are just using this pause to just reload, rest up a little bit, refit, and get a new target.
Meanwhile, the entire time the Strait of Hormuz is closed, putting pressure on the world economy.
Target set, and I think that they're getting ready to go.
Every day it remains closed, Iran is closer to winning.
I think that there is the hope, this outlining hope, that maybe something can, and I think both sides are doing this, that maybe they can get some kind of submission or a concession by the other side, and maybe they can get it. I don't think anybody has any hopes they will, but they're like, it's worth it.
No, too far apart. Trump needs a win, and Iran's condition is they absolutely want a Trump loss. So the positions are as far apart as you can be.
To try, but everything to me looks like, and President Trump's comments this morning on Fox News just reinforced that to me, that he's planning on doing something really, really big to try and coerce it and bring it to an ultimate end, or he may just say, I've destroyed so much, I'm just going to walk away. That's what I think he's getting ready to do. And I'll just tell you, I think that the reason why he's doing this, and again, this is just my assessment, I don't have any insider info on this one, is because he finally recognizes, and his inner circle recognizes, there is no military solution here. They will never be able to military compel Iran.
Yet there's an indication they're bringing in some more troops, ground troops, into the region. And why would you be doing that?
To do what they want is, I think he's going to try some big splashy thing that gives him, at least in his mind, cover to say, okay, we've destroyed everything up to a certain extent. Now we're going to walk away and leave the mess in somebody else's hands. I think.
Yeah, that might be. Trump wants to get out of this. He knows it's killing him politically, and maybe he thinks that he can, if he makes some huge bombing campaign and then walk away. Problem with that is closure of Strait of Hormuz is going to kill him politically, even if the bombs stop flying, even if the ceasefire holds for the next 6 months. If it holds for the next 6 months, but the Strait of Hormuz doesn't open, he's still finished. It's the Strait of Hormuz. He needs it open. And he needs the bomb stop flying. And he needs this to end in a way that he can somehow spin as a victory, which is get the uranium, have Iran capitulate in some major way. So, he's not going to get it.
He's vastly underestimating what the Iranians are going to do in response. If
he does another huge major bombing campaign, Iran is restocking too. It's going to do huge damage across Middle East. It also depends whether this U.S. bombing campaign is targeting what it targets. If it targets energy stuff, energy plants and oil facilities, it'll get really bad.
He does this kind of big bombing campaign, and I don't think it's something you could walk away from, because I think the problems have been built in. But I think my gut tells me that's what he's going to try to do.
But if his objective is to walk away based on the current situation, as per what you explained, and you've always said that they can never have a military solution to the Iran problem, or as they see the Iran problem, why?
He can't walk away. A, Israel won't let him. B, Iran won't let him. And C, closure of Strait of Hormuz. So you can't ignore that.
Why would he do a huge bombing campaign? Like, why not just come to an agreement? Why would he do a bombing campaign and then try and come to an agreement?
Well, because he has to win. He has to be seen.
Exactly. That is the key. Trump has to win. There's already a huge amount of economic pain in the pipeline from this Iran war, and he needs a victory to counter that, to avoid going down politically. But he's not going to get it.
As winning. And if he goes into Islamabad on Saturday and just comes up with some kind of a deal, and then the regime remains in power, they still have their long-range missiles. They still have that reprocessed material. and there's no cutting off of any of their regional allies / proxies, then nobody can spin that into a win on his side. But if he goes in and says now has this massive bombing campaign where they could blow up all kinds of stuff, and there's no question that we could, then you have all these imagery, and in his mind, because remember, he gets.
Yeah, but the problem with that is Iran's going to bomb the shit out of the Middle East too, and those images will be on everyone's mind too.
It's, at least according to news, he gets his information on the war based on this combination, these 2-minute videos of the whatever was blown up in the last day. So he's motivated by that, and I think he believes that others are too. And if they see all this video of stuff blowing up and splashes, then when he says, "I'm leaving on my terms," then
you think it'd work on Asmongold? Just videos of stuff blowing up, be enough. Trump goes in, does a huge bombing campaign, blows up a whole bunch of shit. That'd be enough to convince Asmongold that we're winning the war?
in his mind, he's going to say, I come out on top and it's plausible for my supporters, and then I'll move on to whatever's next. Not realizing the wreckage that he's creating here that won't allow him to, but I think that his mind thinks that that could work.
So you mentioned that he'll have new targets.
He's wishing it's going to work. Ever since he bombed Supreme Leader, Trump has been operating basically off wishful thinking, hoping that I'll try this, I'll try that. I'll bomb a desalination plant. I'll threaten to end this civilization. I'll bomb some of the oil facilities. He just trying one thing after another, seeing if anything will work.
And they're basically coming up with a list of those new targets. This new bombing campaign that begins, how long do you think it's going to be? How long will the new kinetic aspect of the war be?
Well, now that's anybody's guess. I could only speculate, but based on the rate of ammunition that we burned in the first 6 weeks, I think that something like this, I kind of make it similar to, in my mind, at least I perceive it as like the end of a fireworks show in the United States, 4th of July, New Year's Eve, something like that. You have this sustained rate and it's cool. And you look at all this stuff. And then when the thing's just about over, you get this huge splurge and you have, everything gets fired off at the same time. I rather think that he may be having something like that in mind, where he'll come in with this heavy, heavy bombardment that's really sustained, bigger than anything else, but in a short duration of time, designed to produce a video image that he can pass around as being successful. So my guess is that it would be a shorter period of time, maybe a week, because we don't have that much more ammunition. We can't do another 6 weeks, at least at that sustained rate that we did the first time. I don't know that we have enough left in our inventories. The Washington Post has been reporting in the last week or so that our long-range JASSM cruise missiles and our Tomahawk cruise missiles were already at critical low levels. And we certainly know that the PAC-3s interceptors were low, the THAADs were low, the Arrow 2, Arrow 3 for the Israeli sides were low. You just can't go on a longer sustained ride. So I think that he would do like maybe a week. And this is, again, I'll just caveat this is purely a guess on my part. I don't have any knowledge, but that's what I think based on how much ammunition we have and what I perceive he's trying to accomplish.
Interesting. Now, another report we've got earlier on today was that they're sending 10,000 more troops to the Middle East, in addition to the previous ones that were already sent. What would be the reason for sending those 10,000 if it's merely going to be a bombing campaign?
Exactly. What's the point of that?
For a very limited period of time.
Well, now the information I have is that a bombing campaign is coming. That's not to say, and these source doesn't know what.
Yes, there'll be a bombing campaign for sure. Every time Trump has moved bombs into the Middle East, he's used them. And so, yeah, next week, bombs will be flying. They'll probably try something on the ground somewhere too. Just undercover a huge aerial bombardment. They'll try to capture something.
What else may be happening? Also on Fox News yesterday, Rebecca Heinrichs, who has very close coordination with the administration, has for a long time, she said that we have the ground power to go and take the reprocessed material. Now, that would be
That's what I think we already tried to do one time unsuccessfully during that whole pilot incident. It won't work. And it's absolutely insane. I will add that according to Russian assessment of situation, U.S. will try something on the ground next week. That's official consensus of Russian intelligence.
Insane, just self-defeating operation if we did it. But one wonders with this surge of additional combat power, which she also cited in that segment, that maybe that's what they're going into, which would just be ludicrous. Now, first of all, when you look at under the headlines of this 10,000 troops have been sent in there, 6,000 of them are coming in on the George W. Bush. So it's not like those are available to go do anything on the ground, but that other 4,000 on top of what was already there with the 82nd Airborne Division and the 2 Marine Expeditionary Units, all that together could put, a fairly decent number of troops, ground troops in the area. We already know we had the A-10 ground attack aircraft that are directly in support of ground operations, the Apache helicopters that are in support of ground operations. So there's a lot of power there that you could do a raid on something. But man, I'm telling you, the military challenge of going and trying to take in a defended site, if there's only one, and I can't imagine Iran would be so foolish as to put it all in one place where a single point of failure. I'm sure that they have it spread out in different places. But I mean, even if you just picked one of those, it's going to be heavily defended.
And there's a risk it's actually in the cave-in room inside a mountain, because we bombed that last year. We don't know if it's moved. We don't know so we might have to dig through the mountain to get to it if we did try to do this. It's absolutely insane.
Almost certainly going to be under multiple layers underground, defended with, everything that they've got. It's going to have whatever's on the point. They're also going to, no doubt, would have, I would imagine anyway, I certainly would, in mountains around it, where they can fire down on below. So when you're making an ingress into it, it's going to be on a like say in a valley of some sort, to where there's a limited avenue of approach where you could make. They'll have it mined. They'll have it targeted, maybe artillery with rockets, with drones, to attrit anything coming in, to make it harder for the attacking force. And I mean, unless Iran is stupid, that's what they'll do. And it's just, I just don't see any chance that it could win. That's what she said. Maybe that's just bluster. I hope so. But if they do attempt something like that, it's going to be one of the biggest disasters militarily we've ever had.
Agreed.
Yeah, why would they try something like that?
No, I think bombing Supreme Leader was the biggest military disaster we've ever had, and everything that follows is a result of that one disaster.
Wasn't there, I mean, in my view, when they tried to do it in south of Isfahan, I do think that was some kind of attempt to procure nuclear enrichment, and that didn't go too well. This lost a couple of MC-130s, they lost a few other aircrafts as well. It just doesn't make sense that they would try and do that. I think what you're saying or what you're proposing makes a lot more sense in terms of this 1 week or even a limited bombing campaign, and that's why you've got the George Bush. So just a question to you on that. The George Bush is moving. I believe they're about 5 to 7 days away. They had to take the longer route to the Middle East to kind of
around the Horn of Africa to avoid the Houthis.
Get away from the Houthis. They'll have the George Bush, they'll have the Abraham Lincoln, they'll have the Gerald Ford there now. Is that part of the siege, or do you think this is going to be part of the bombing campaign as well?
Yeah, I mean, we can just speculate, but I mean, the fact that there's going to be an overlay, apparently the George W. Bush is to relieve the Gerald R. Ford, but there will be a period of time where they're all there on station at the same time. And that lends credibility to the prospect that there's going to be a big bombing campaign, because you'll have all of that combat power there at the same time. And then if you think you're going to walk away, then you're going to leave with that combat power in place. But, who can say what's going to happen? But that's certainly a plausible alternative.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned that the Americans are building.
Yeah, Saudis aren't going to be happy when the war resumes. They're also in trouble because of the blockade that U.S. is doing. If that is actually successful, Iran and Houthis will retaliate, closing these straits here, and they'll target the pipeline that brings oil across Saudi Arabia from here to here, and cut that off in retaliation. That's one thing they'll do for sure. So that's why the Saudis were the one Gulf state that was against this U.S. blockade of Iran, because they know they're at risk. They're the one Gulf nations that still is exporting a fair amount of oil via port here.
Up. You mentioned KC tankers. There's cargo planes that have gone to Qatar, Israel, and Jordan. If you can expand on the mode and method by which they've been bolstering the ammunitions.
Yeah, because a lot of that, especially in the C5 and C-17s, that's what we did before this started. When we saw a lot of the similar kind of traffic that was being put out on a lot of these websites that track the tail numbers of these aircraft, we were seeing the exact same thing. And because during the buildup, like the month and a half or so before this started, you could see that they were moving it all over the place. So they had interceptor missiles that they were stocking up at many of our bases. You had certainly the cruise missiles and the JASSMs that were located at certain bases. A lot was on the aircraft carriers themselves that they brought in. Some of the other missile carriers had those kinds of things. Well, we've used up somewhere around 14,000 total of these offensive missiles of various kinds. So you got to replace those. And so the easiest way to do that is to fly them in to certain locations where you can transload them either onto launchers or maybe even put them onto the ships, et cetera. So it's a complicated maneuver, but that's from what the anecdotal evidence that we have, that's probably what's been going on like it did the first time.
Okay. And you also mentioned Iran. You said Iran is now resupplying, bolstering up, going to their different missile launch sites, recovering them. What's your information on how Iran is proceeding in this ceasefire in order to be ready for a kinetic war?
I had Professor Saeed Morandi on the show, and of course he was part of the Iranian delegation in Islamabad, and I had him on the show Monday, and he was rather emphatic, if not eager, when I asked him, what is Iran doing in this period right here? And he said, oh, we are definitely preparing for what comes next, because we had no trust in the United States at all. And so we're doing everything we can to prepare. He didn't give me a lot of details of what they were doing, but one can certainly imagine lots of anecdotal reports of plane loads of stuff coming in from China, from other sources, from Russia perhaps. But you can also imagine, just as a military, I would imagine this is your perfect opportunity to move things from one location to another. Like if you have production facilities in here, but you also have to have, some of the feedstocks that go along with it, but maybe they're over there and it's dangerous to move them when you know that there are predator drones, looking to fire on something. But if you're in a ceasefire time, now that you can move those things on there. So you're going to be taking advantage of that opportunity to get things where they need to go, to distribute stuff. Like I've got a bunch of missiles over here, but we didn't use as many here. And so I need them over.
Yeah, both sides are taking advantage of the ceasefire. When I was thinking ceasefire was bad for Iran, that was in context of opening Strait of Hormuz, because that what didn't make sense to me. A ceasefire where the Strait of Hormuz remains closed, yes, that's perfectly fine for Iran. It's not pressure point against the United States is ultimately the Strait of Hormuz. Every day it remains closed, they're one step closer to victory. So whether there's a ceasefire or not, that doesn't matter to Iran. It's as long as they keep the straits closed.
Over here, so I'm going to transload them over there too, something like that. But they're definitely taking advantage of this opportunity, maybe redoubling on their defensive capacities, et cetera. And I would also imagine, to the extent they can, they're going to increase the production capacity in these underground missile facilities of additional replacement missiles, so that every day they haven't had to use offensive means that they can build their stockpiles back up. And I think that's one of the biggest things why they were willing to have a ceasefire, because that gives them the opportunity to build their stockpiles back up.
And in addition to that, I've heard they're also excavating certain areas as well, which may have been hit, and getting the missile launch pads as well. So you know exactly what you said is happening from the Iranian side. I guess now the other question is this. It's something that we've been speaking about a lot, and it's something I've been asking the guests a lot. And I did ask Professor Morandi the same question. Why would the Iranians agree to the ceasefire? It seems like they had the Americans and the Israelis where they wanted.
They do. Their biggest point of pressure is keeping the Strait of Hormuz closed. I told you, the victory condition, in my mind, 6 months to keep the Strait of Hormuz closed. 6 months. So ceasefire or not, as long as the straits are closed, they're inching closer to victory. Bombs flying, ultimately, that's a sideshow to the economic damage they're doing to the world economy through the Straits of Hormuz. So why not have a ceasefire? I'd see no issue against that. As long as you don't do something stupid like open the straits and give away your leverage, and that was insane when the Iranian spokesman, after they announced ceasefire, said they'd open the straits. I think someone talked sense into him after that.
They had them in a tough spot. Why let up and allow this ceasefire to occur? Because now you've allowed the US to kind of make some other moves that maybe make a bit more sense.
Yeah, it's a 6 of one, half dozen of the other kind of situation. So it's a pros and cons. So the cons are what you just mentioned there, but there's definitely pros for the Iranian side too. By having this, that gives them a chance to move things around, to recover, some of these mountain locations where the exits or the silos may have been damaged, and that gives them a chance to clear that stuff off without having to worry about another missile coming in while you got the crews out there to try to fix that. But then, the other issue I just mentioned, there is a big advantage to where you can continue your production, whether it's drones or missiles, to say, let's keep.
Yeah, I'm sure they have missile production in the mountains. What I wonder is how advanced that missile production is. They've gotten several different types. They're most advanced. They're hypersonic missiles. Can they make those in mountains too? Are they making more of those? Or was that something that was made that can't, too complex to be made in mountains? It's what I'm curious about. In any case, they're most likely continuing to make drones and at least some ballistic missiles of some types. Maybe the most complex ones, the Farah like 2 and 3. They might not be able to make those inside a mountain.
Keep building up the stockpiles that we have, so that when this thing resumes, we're able to go back further. We can extend the range and the amount of time that we have to strike. But there are some downsides to that. But I don't. To me, the downsides are like about here, and the upsides are over here. Because at the end of the day, the Americans are still going to be there, and we could have not had a ceasefire and still moved all these missiles in and replaced them. We could have done that even during the time, because Iran's obviously not going to be able to shoot the planes down as they're coming in. So there wasn't a whole lot of loss there from what they would have had otherwise. And it always leaves the possibility that maybe China, maybe Russia, maybe some of these other people can find some way.
On a quick note, Iran is rapidly rebuilding. Like, for example, Iran boasted it's fast rebuilding bridges and rail lines after U.S. wrought destruction. So remember that bridge that U.S. bombed? Well, they're rebuilding it. I think was particularly impressive. An incredible railroad bridge reconstruction in Iran after U.S.-Israeli attack in 72 hours. So they're rebuilding and they've been having a lot of money flow from the oil up to now that wasn't sanctioned and was flowing out before the U.S. blockade. So they've had money to rebuild stuff like this. And yeah, that's civilian infrastructure. This bridge here was intended a bypass to relieve congestion within Tehran. It had no real military purpose. There might be some military trucks to drive all night occasionally, but it's 99% civilian.
Way to convince the Americans that they can't win. And so let's have some kind of negotiations that Iran can live with. I think it was worth giving it a shot. I think they had every expectation it wouldn't work, but they could say, hey, why not? I mean, maybe it'll work, because they can see that there is no military solution for the U.S. and it is irrational and illogical for us to do this. So maybe they're just thinking, hey.
Did you notice that Lebanese cities are being wiped on Google?
Has anybody else noticed on Instagram maps that mostly all of the cities and towns in southern Lebanon have just disappeared?
Today is 12th of April 2026. This is the screenshot I took this afternoon from Apple Map. And this is the screen record I made. Cities in southern Lebanon are all empty. But look, you can still see the Israeli cities here. This is so suspicious. Oh my God. You see here? Nothing. I even zoomed in to the border. You see here? Nothing you can find here. Nothing. All the names are gone. You can still see the Israeli cities.
Well, Israel intends to wipe them all off the map, and I think Google got ahead of itself. Let me have a look at that. Okay. So Google Maps at least has cities. They fixed the issue. But this is an Apple Maps. So I didn't check my iPhone, but I'm using that stream, so I can't do it. But just the fact that they did that even once and someone could take screenshots of it, it's a little bit insane.
Maybe just by buying a couple of weeks, some sanity can seep in by accident or something. I don't know. I'm just guessing on that part. But all we know is what they did. I can only guess at why they did it.
And the reason I asked this question, because I do want to talk about the blockade in a second, but the reason I asked this question is they've essentially allowed the US to kind of shift gear more to a non-kinetic war and more of a kind of economic war. And what I mean by that is the blockade they've put in, some of the sanctions they're saying they're going to be putting on the Iranians. Now, we're going to talk about the success of that in a second, but I was always a big believer that before this war, if they'd gone down that road, that actually would have made a lot more sense. You basically choke the Iranians out, and their people over time may turn on them, especially when they've not been bombed, because they were already having protests about the economic situation.
But you forget China and Russia can provide enough economic aid to counter that. The China doesn't want it. Iran was already under all these sanctions. There's only so much we could do above that, and they could bring in materials via land from above, via sea, via here. China, we can't our power is situated to the south. We can't stop stuff from coming in from the north.
So it seems like
And
what
a
they're
lot has been coming in during the ceasefire. We're going to. I wonder if Iran's air defense is getting another upgrade.
done is realize that's something we should have done. Let's shift to that. It may be too late to do that, but there may be some kind of impact. And so there is a possibility that if this doesn't happen, what you said in terms of the kinetic warfare, that they've kind of allowed the Americans an out, allow them to shift gear, move more towards a kinetic war. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so there's something that mitigates against that, and this maybe go back to why we have the issue of what was the motivation for the Iranian side to have this negotiation. All the time of this negotiation, while the bombs haven't been falling, the pressure on the West has been accumulating. So they don't have the luxury anymore of just waiting this out like they would have in the scenario you drew. The problem with that one,
yes, the Strait of Hormuz are closed, and that's killing the global economy, and Trump can't afford that. It'll cost him the midterms, but he can't stop it either.
is Trump doesn't do long term. Trump doesn't do medium term. He wants an immediate reaction right now and something he wants to win today. He doesn't want to work on it, whatever. Anything's going to be some number of years. It's it can't be specific. He doesn't want to do that. So maybe that would work. Maybe it wouldn't. He doesn't want to try. He wanted to blow him up like he did with Maduro because he keeps thinking back. He keeps talking about that.
Yeah, Venezuela was the perfect Trump operation. Just capture leader. It's over instantly. No U.S. casualties. Yes, that's what he wanted. But, oh my God. Following Supreme Leader, what a mistake.
Still does, like I did with Maduro. He said that, I think, yesterday, or this morning, rather, in that interview with Maria Bartiromo, which is a problem because he's thinking that immediate action, counteraction result, bam.
I say, you'll know this is coming to an end. This conflict in Iran is really coming to an end when Trump stops talking about having won in Iran. When he starts actually admitting that well, there wasn't a U.S. victory, that maybe not, he doesn't need to be saying it's a defeat, but when he admits it wasn't a total U.S. victory, I think that's the point where he's actually finally ready to negotiate and get out of this. But yeah, as long as he's talking about the complete U.S. victory in Iran, this conflict is going to continue.
We're in and out. We're done.
Because Iran is not going to give him a total victory.
He still wants something like that. While this ceasefire has been going on, however, the pressure on the United States because of the absence of oil.
Epstein files, I think that's going to come into play nearer to the midterms. It's going to be an October surprise, September surprise, whatever. They're going to leak stuff that's hurtful to Trump. That's my opinion. So I don't know if we'll have much activities in the Epstein files before then.
Coming out at I think it's 10 to 12 million barrels a day shortfall that can't get out through other means. That is a major compounding problem that is continuing to increase the pressure. And as I talked about on our show earlier this morning, I mean, you're having fertilizer problems in America right now, in Asia, in Africa, other problems with diesel in Europe.
We looked at stories about that yesterday.
You see what's happening in Ireland. That's in part a problem to this and maybe a moniker of what's to come as these prices continue to go up. So it could be that the Iranians said, you know what, let's just let that cook a little bit. And we'll just kind of sit back here because we're already under sanctions. We're already under this privation. And if you want to put a blockade on us, okay, that's not a big deal.
Hold the straits closed 6 months. That's all Iran needs to do. And it's doing it.
It's not that big of a problem. It's painful.
It won't be long before 2 months before they're 1/3 of the way there.
Want it, but it's not that big, not that different than what we had before. But this on the West is a big one. And that pressure is really starting to add up. And the longer this goes, the deeper the problems that are going to come later. And like this issue with the fertilizers and whatnot, that's already have compounding problems into the fall when you get into, because we're in the planting season right now. And the fact that we don't have enough fertilizer at an affordable price to go along with the significant increase in diesel, which is necessary for all the farming, means that our
huge increase of costs for farmers. So wealthier farmers, they'll be able to bite the bullet, bite those costs, and they'll plant full crops, use fertilizer in anticipation for the higher prices that are sure to come. But farmers that don't have that luxury will just not use fertilizer or plant less if they can't afford diesel. And that means less harvest. And that's a lot of the farmers around the world will be in that situation. And we're going to have a much, much smaller crop this fall than normal.
Crop yields are going to be down when it comes time to reap the harvest. And
just like the 70s and 80s. Well, I don't remember that far back, but I know that it's probably going to be maybe like the disaster year 2009, where there were all kinds of problems with the U.S. harvest.
And it's still not open. It's still not available. So I think the Iranian sides are counting we're under pressure, we're under pain. The longer this goes,
No, but actually, I can believe that. The 70s and 80s had huge inflation during that period, and that hits farmers. And that can hit farmers really badly. And I can understand a lot of them going under and big corporations buying them out, etc.
we could suffer some more for these bombs, but I think that they are looking longer term. And I think they say for a short-term pain, we can get this leverage on the Americans later on. So that could be what their strategy is, and that makes some sense.
Yeah, no doubt. And we're seeing as well that a lot of American allies are struggling. Japan, South Korea, Taiwan, India. I mean, when you look at Japan, they've got a decision to make. Like they're gonna be, because remember they're the top three countries. So India second, Japan third, South Korea fourth. These countries are gonna have to make a decision. And I'm hearing that the Japanese are being told, the president of Japan is being told, you may have to sell American bonds. So the situation is really bad when it comes to the allies. So exactly what you said. But just a question in terms of the blockade, and I want to go to that. It's been so confusing. And okay,
And I can go back to the articles from way back when. One reason that China has these huge reserves of U.S. bonds is we asked them to. We asked them to buy lots of our debt. If you ask mainstream media today, it's all about, it's to hold the currency down. They come up with other economic reasons, whatever. No, the original reason Japan started accumulating huge U.S. reserves was to help prop up the U.S. dollar when it was under pressure. And if it's forced to sell off those reserves because of this oil crisis, that will create major problems for the United States. And Trump is going to have to try to put pressure on Japan not to do that. But there's a whole host of other problems coming towards Trump as the economic pain from the Strait of Hormuz closure. It's delayed. So yes, it's starting now. You have higher gas prices, but it's always like delayed, like half a month, a month. It's really going to get bad in another month.
I do have some biases, and this is why I want to hear from you, because you're always level-headed in these type of things. It's like we hear there's a blockade by the United States of America. We hear that there's no ships coming out, but then we saw initially 4 ships came out. 2 did come out from Iranian ports. One of them was the Elpis, and I forgot the name of the second one. Then we hear that actually Americans have allowed 20 vessels through, but then they say there's a complete blockade. And then Trump comes out with a statement today and says, the strait is open. G's going to give me a beautiful hug. Like, what is going on? I'm really confused.
A big fat hug is the way you put it for Xi Jinping. Yeah. Look, this just...
I wonder how well Trump is sleeping these days. It can't be well. And a lot of people think his erratic behavior is because he's crazy, but I think he's just the stress would make anyone act crazy in this situation. I mean, someone with an ego as big as him having made a decision that ended his presidency, bombing supreme leader. Yeah, he's going to be flailing every which way, trying not to recognize what he's done.
I mean, we just got to be honest, man. I mean, this just shows the scatter shooting mentality of President Trump. Because I mean, just look in the first few weeks, we won the war. Basically, it's already won. It's done. Problem.
You browsed 4chan today for some opinion surfing, and it's not good. Not good in which direction? In terms of pain from this, in terms of the outlook, in terms of not recognizing reality. I mean, for Trump, yes, it's not good. People turning on him. Yeah, there'll be anger. There'll be anger on those boards, and more as we get into the summer, because anyone's paying the gas bill is still fairly cold in some places. Anyone electricity bill, gas bill, grocery bill, then gradual increase in all other prices because of fuel costs for transportation.
48
Amazon surcharges.
hours, I'm going to destroy civilization. You know what? I'm not even going to worry about the straits. It's not a problem to me. I don't need oil there. You can get it. And then it's like to Europe, you know what? Why aren't you helping? I'm mad at you, et cetera. And then, all right, now there's a 10-day deal. All right, now it's a 5. What is it? It goes, I'm going to destroy the whole civilization.
I mean, if you list everything we've had from Trump, first it was trying to bomb various different types of infrastructure, desalination plants, an oil refinery next weekend, and LNG plant the weekend after that. Then he started doing gave one ultimatum. Then he extended that ultimatum by 10 days, despite having no negotiations, whatever, just making up fictional negotiations. Then he issued another 48-hour ultimatum, and getting towards the end of that, he made wild remarks like, open the fucking straits, and you fucking crazy bastards, praise be to Allah. On Easter, he says that. Then he threatens to wipe out the civilization. Then he gets the ceasefire, and he agrees to the Iranians' 10-point plan. Then next day he says he threw those 10-point plan in the trash. Then negotiations go nowhere. It's the Americans that leave after one day, surprising the Iranians and Pakistanis. And now there's this huge buildup again in the Middle East for Trump doubling down on escalation. It's been a wild ride in the Iran war.
Now I want them to prosper, and now we're willing to make a deal, but we're not willing to make a deal on this. And then the next day, we're just looking for this. All I need to hear is that they're not going to make a nuclear weapon, even though that's all they've ever said. So how do you trust any specific statement that comes out on a day when it could be completely contradicted the next day? And policies are trying to follow up on that. Meanwhile, oil's not getting out to the tune of 10 to 12 million barrels per day, and that is causing compounding problems. So he's scatter shooting all over the place, but the problems are just building up.
Yep.
So, but I totally agree with that. But what is actually happening on the Strait, though? So, like, what is, like, we're hearing just so many mixed messages. From your understanding, what is actually happening with the movement of the vessels?
Yeah, there's some huge problems on our side of this. The Iranian side, I haven't seen any change in what they've been willing to let through. And so nothing has been moving through that wasn't moving through already before that, but that they didn't risk, other than maybe one or two that have leaked through something, or maybe none. I haven't seen it, but definitely no large scale. Meanwhile, what we say, yes, we are completely shutting it down. And then it's like, well, we're shutting down anything from the Iranian side. And then, well, except for something from China on the Iranian side. One wonders how much of that negotiation between Washington and Beijing had happened, because some had gotten through there. He also said anything that paid a toll and got out before that, we'll go chase that down too. I don't know how he's going to get that done. But the bottom line is, it's a huge risk. What are we going to do? If a tanker comes through that is coordinated between Tehran and Beijing and it starts to come through, are we going to board it? Are we going to sink it? Are we going to stop it? I mean, what you see, we're putting this impossible situation here to where we can have a major international incident that would explode this thing. And that's not what President Trump wants to do. He's trying to put pressure on. He's not trying to expand it that could cost us more somewhere else. But you can see China seems to be thinking, maybe we're going to test you on this. We're going to see where it's going to go. So far, we haven't been willing to do that. In fact, I've not heard of a single report that we boarded a ship and forced it to go somewhere else against its will or so. So far, other than words, I haven't really seen any action on anything. But the ships still aren't coming out for a bunch of reasons, not just because we have a blockade out there.
Yeah, and in terms of the Chinese, from your experience, I've always thought the Chinese are like averse to military confrontation. They feel like this isn't the right time to go down that road. Maybe in the future, or a long time in the future, they may try and do that. And so,
long time. I'm not sure about long time, because if they want Taiwan next year, within the next 2 years, best possible time to do that, because as U.S. bogged down in Iran and wasting all its ammunition, moving its air defenses out of Southeast Asia. If this Iran war is settled, the first thing America does is builds up its defenses around China again. It gives another THAAD system back to South Korea. So this is a unique window of opportunity, of vulnerability, if they want to do something about Taiwan. And so if they're actually serious about going after Taiwan, I would move in that direction. I would put pressure and consider some military options in next year. Because you're not going to get a better opportunity than this.
so do you think the Chinese are going to limit or even stop their vessels coming out so they don't have that confrontation with the United States of America? Or do you think they're going to test the United States of America and try and bring a vessel out?
Well, I mean, they have gotten some Chinese-backed vessels that have come through. So whether that was a test or whether that was also coordinated with Washington, who can say for sure? But I think China definitely, I mean, they're risk averse. They've always been. They talk a tough game, but they're always risk averse, for preferring to take the long view on everything. And I don't see any reason to think that's changed right now. But I can see them saying, let's just do a little test here and just going to see what happens.
Yeah, I agree with that they're risk averse or whatever, but an opportunity as attractive as currently for possibly doing something about Taiwan when it's more vulnerable than it's ever been, and it might not remain that way. I mean, if they're risk averse, as someone who sometimes plays risk averse in the games, there's a fantastic opportunity. Risk averse people will go for it, because you're going to do, if you know there's something that you're going to have to do at some point, might as well do it when it's the best possible chance. So, I mean, Taiwan is a real danger of having something happen around. I don't necessarily mean even a military campaign. It could just be a blockade of the island to force it to capitulate and rejoin China. It's even if we blockaded the island, again, we are at our weakest point in forever in for like 100 years in terms of because of all the ammunition we've expanded in this Iran war.
Because even if we should do it, I think that there is no chance, zero, that we're actually going to board a vessel with a Chinese flag on it that we didn't have authorization to, much less fire on it, even though we threatened to do some of that. I just don't think we would do it. And I can see where China might be saying, hey, it's an acceptable risk to try and push that through and to see what they would do. And, and if we did something like that, there could be some.
Also, China hates the idea of naval blockade because that's one avenue that U.S. war planners say if we ever win a war with China, we'll blockade it via the sea. So China, with that threat in the back of their mind, they don't want the United States to have carried out a successful blockade of Iran. It gives them, okay, this is how we do it for when we want to use against China. No, they want this blockade to fail. China really, more than Russia or Iran, wants this blockade to fail. And so I wouldn't be surprised if Chinese warships show up in the region to escort tankers out. And why these tankers are turning back, whatever, I'm sure there might be just accumulating there. So that when there's 10 of them or something, and then Chinese warships, which it takes a while for them to get here to all the way over here. But when China warships arrive, they escort a big group, maybe 10, 20 tankers over to China in one group.
Some ramifications.
What will the U.S. do then? Well, the U.S., if you have a dozen Chinese warships accompanying 20 tankers, does U.S. engage?
I mean, we're going to get into a war, but that could just ramp up the risk and the potential consequences and reactions by the Chinese side that they may calculate could be in their favor. But what I don't see them doing is just cowering down and saying, because we don't want a war, we're going to let the Americans.
And if China does escort a bunch of its tankers out, you know what's going to happen? Tankers from other countries are going to join that convoy, or try to. Well, it depends whether China would let them. Maybe they would. You might have even more tankers go out in one big group under Chinese protection.
Do everything they want and call the shots. I think those days are over, and I think there's more and more testing is going to happen, whether that's financially with selling bonds or maybe testing a blockade.
So obviously you've clarified that you think this blockade isn't a great idea. Remember, if Trump...
By the way, this would be happening in 2 weeks if it did, and it would give China plenty of time. It's probably already has, I bet, warships en route over here. And it maybe hasn't done a final decision yet whether it'll attempt this, but if it's U.S. is still blockading this in 2 weeks, they may decide, okay, we need to do something, and they'll escort tankers out.
Trump came to you and said, you know what, we want to put a blockade in. We want to try and recontrol the flow of traffic in the area. The Iranians are not going to get any ships out. How would you have implemented the drone in the blockade in a different way in order to make sure that the mission statement of the president is accomplished?
Well, I don't think there is a way. I mean, there is no effective.
And if China does that, you know what? India might decide, what the hell, just for its national pride. If China can do it, so can we. And they'll send in their warships to escort tankers out. The blockade will collapse.
The blockade is not any different than it was before when the Iranians were in control of it, because almost nothing was getting down to a trickle. I think 20 was the most they got through on a day. Otherwise, it was around 10 or single digits.
Average of 6 to 10 a day.
That they permitted to get through or paid this toll or whatever. And, of course, we need 100, 130 per day to be able to get the flow out that we need. So as long as Iran continues to hold their end of the blockade up, it doesn't matter what we do out here. So there's not a good way to do it, because what has been the effect? If we're talking here, there wasn't traffic before, there hasn't been traffic since. So what has really been blockaded? So I think that it was just a bad idea. There's not a good way to do it.
Okay. And Iran has already moved significant quantities of oil tankers out and parking them over further here in different places so that it can sell them later. Because I honestly expected U.S. to blockade Iran tankers coming out of the Gulf the day of the war starting. Makes sense. If Iran closed straits, we blockade it, so their oil can't come out either. Because it'd be even a bigger shock to the global oil market, but it would put pressure on Iran. If we're serious about getting them to capitulate, we need to put pressure on them. And every tanker they get out is more money to buy the materials to make missiles.
Okay. Now, I want to shift gear to the negotiations. I know you're highly respected within Washington, were considered within the intelligence apparatus. What happened with the negotiations? What went wrong? We're hearing reports that obviously J.D. Vance had to speak to Netanyahu. He had to report to Netanyahu, and obviously spoke to Trump.
That was insane. Netanyahu was saying that Trump and Vance are reporting to me about the negotiations. That's what he said in the speech. The arrogance of that man is... Yeah. Is he even more arrogant than Trump? Maybe, possibly. I don't know.
Is normal. But what's your thought?
Trump has a pretty big ego, so that might be hard, but the things he says sometimes.
About the negotiations in terms of the way they were conducted and what actually went wrong?
Well, I don't know that anything went wrong, because I think they came out exactly the way everybody expected them to, because you had hard positions on the Iranian side publicly going in.
I said the negotiations would collapse from the moment they were announced. The two positions are irreconcilable. Trump wants victory for himself. Iran wants a loss for Trump.
You had hard positions on the American side publicly coming in. So I viewed these ahead of time, and I think I said it on my show, that I figured this is going to be like the May 2025 first meeting between Russia and Ukraine, with their first direct negotiations, where everybody came in with a hard position.
Yeah, there was no hope for those negotiations either, because Ukraine refuses to accept any territorial concessions, and it wants Russia to move out of all the land they captured. That's what Ukraine wants. And Russia wants Ukraine to move out of the land they declared that is now part of Russia, and a bunch of other stuff like protecting the rights of ethnic Russians in Ukraine. And yeah, Ukraine doesn't want to do that.
Position, and that was going to be the start of a process, and of course it never materialized into anything, as we have to this very day, and the positions were equally hard on this side. So I thought that this is just an opportunity for the United States to say, to our domestic audience, well, we're trying to find, we have the open hand of diplomacy. I've heard a few pathetically say here in the Western media, that are friends with the administration, and I think the Iranian side was saying, I don't trust you as far as I can throw you, which I'm not even going to attempt to, but we're going to go through this kabuki dance anyway, because it makes us look like we're the reasonable ones. And I think that this is the whole thing was
they won that PR battle, by the way, Iran, because after one day of negotiations, just at the end of the day, U.S. just packed up and left without explaining or scheduling any further negotiations. So the one who walked away from negotiations was the United States, not Iran. The more rational party appears to be Iran.
Designed by both sides to try and extract as much public relations benefit as they can. And I think it's very possible, and we won't know until after the fact, years later probably, but I don't think that anybody thought this was going to lead to any kind of negotiated settlement, and both sides were willing to use it to help themselves militarily prepare for what's coming next. And so you have to have this fiction for
pretty much what happened. Both sides had no confidence in it. Trump had to know that his maximalist demands Iran would never give him that. And Iran same, no trust for the United States. So both sides just scrambling to get ready for the next round of bombing.
For the American people and for the public, that we're at least trying, even though.
What I'm curious about is when the United States begins this big new bombing campaign, will there be more loss of U.S. aircrafts? Has Iran's air defenses been upgraded? Because I think their missile stocks, that was pretty much consistent. We can't wipe that out. That'll always be there. But they need to put, it would be really a game changer if their air defenses had received any type of upgrade since this conflict started, where we don't have air supremacy anymore over Iran. We'll have to see.
Well, I don't think that there even is. So the idea that there may be another one here in a day or two just probably implies that one or both sides has not yet gotten all the military stuff that they needed. We've already seen that happen. That's what happened before this. Remember, it looked like this was going to kick off in the middle of January. Yeah. Then it looked like in the first third or so of February, and then things keep shifting in and more stuff keeps coming in. And then all of a sudden here it comes on the 28th when it did in the middle of negotiations. So I think that this is kind of an old playbook. So I don't think that it went wrong. I think that everybody's just playing a role that nobody thinks it's going to result in anything.
That's interesting. So you think that the negotiations that may happen on Thursday The Pakistani delegates in Iran right now, there is claims that there could be a negotiation on Thursday. There are reports that there could be a 14-day extension and Lebanon could be included, although Netanyahu just came out 20 minutes ago and said, we're going to continue bombing Lebanon. But the claim was that they'd already got assurances from the Israelis. So what do you think happened there? Actually, let me ask a specific question rather than be vague. There is reports right now saying the Pakistanis went to Iran. They said, guess what? We've got an agreement from the United States of America. We've got an agreement from Israel. Lebanon is now going to be included in the extension and for the rest of this week. Iran said, we need the Israelis to come out and confirm that. Netanyahu came out and said, we're going to continue bombing Lebanon. What's your thoughts on what happened there?
I can't say why anybody in Pakistan. I mean, honestly, if what we say you can't trust anywhere, why would we have the same thing for the Israeli side, who routinely does the same thing?
God, Netanyahu. He's such a bastard. Such a predictable bastard.
That's where we learned it. But I mean, you had this whole situation here where the Pakistanis thought they were dealing, with reasonable people, and they said Lebanon was included in it. We said Lebanon was included. That was obviously part of the, that leaked draft, so-called, that was put out initially by the Pakistani Prime Minister's office. Everybody knew that it included that. We knew it included that. And then apparently, according to reports anyway, Netanyahu just freaked out about it, went angry like 4 hours later, and basically told Trump, not only no, but hell no. And then, of course, had that massive, biggest ever, as a really in-your-face that I'm calling the shots here, and we'll have a ceasefire when I say we're going to have a ceasefire. And then now here, apparently, I didn't see this until you're mentioning it, apparently it's happened again. If there was some commentary to the Pakistani delegation that we were willing to extend the ceasefire period in order to make sure that Lebanon is included in it, and then if Netanyahu did what he did there, he still.
So you have two huge obstacles to peace. One, Trump's ego. He can't recognize that he's fucked himself over politically and capitulate to whatever Iran wants to open the straits. 1, 2, you have Netanyahu and Israel that have no intention of letting this war end.
Still calling the shot.
I mean, Netanyahu is in the same position as Trump, is that he needs a victory out of this or he's finished politically. And if Trump does any type of ceasefire with Iran and ends the war and gets straits open, he's fucked politically. Completely fucked if the situation ends this way. So he needs this war to continue and somehow get a victory out of it too, just like Trump.
So you make of that what you will, but it's until the president of the United States decides he's calling the shots for the United States, and he's going to put Benjamin Netanyahu in a box if he steps outside and impugns on our international interests, then this is going to continue to happen. And Israel doesn't appear to have any interest in this to be over. I think they don't care what happens with a lot of this, the second, third order effects, as long as U.S. bombs and missiles keep raining down on Iran. I think he's just obsessed with that, and I think he'll continue to sabotage things. And the question is, will Trump ever stand up for American national interest?
Netanyahu probably still hoping that Iran disintegrates somehow if the United States bombs it enough.
And so far, he hasn't.
Yeah, that's been the biggest concern. Now, from Iran's perspective, I've been reading quite a lot and speaking to a lot of people, and there is starting to be a bit of dissenting voices against the current government. And what I mean by that is they're not happy about the negotiations. I know you mentioned that you felt like they were being hardline. These people feel like they've been too soft, that they gave too much movement.
There's the same problem in Russia. People saying we haven't been hard enough on Ukraine, and what are all these negotiations for and everything. Yep, there's definitely that. I can see why. There's anger. We bombed their supreme leader, their pope, and then we bombed the shit out of their countries, and we bombed schoolgirls. Yeah, I perfectly understand them being angry.
When it came to the nuclear enrichment, apparently they were willing to have a pause for like 5 years. They were willing to deplete their 60% uranium. They were willing to go all the way down. We don't know the exact figure, but they were willing to go really all the way down in terms of the nuclear enrichment. But the Americans were like, no, we want 0%. And so some of these forces within Iran are saying, maybe the reformists are having too much power. There's too much concessions going on, especially after they killed our supreme leader. Especially,
Suleiman, I'm sorry, I can answer this real quick, but then I have to run. I'm like 1 minute away from having to be somewhere else.
Oh, of course, yeah, good.
Yeah, listen, the bottom line is I just don't think that anybody knows for sure what's going on inside of Iran, but there are definitely two competing camps. One wants the war to be over and they're willing to have some kind of diplomacy, but if they can get guarantees, and the other one is saying there's never going to be, you can never trust.
Yeah, if anyone who truly was loyal to the last supreme leader, the one who was killed, they want to inflict a loss on the United States. And there's probably a big group. And then you have people just angry at the United States for bombing and killing their loved ones or destroying their businesses and whatever. And all of those people just want a price. If you're someone whose business has already been destroyed by a bomb and you have nothing left, all you have left is revenge. If you're someone who still has a business, you're more interested in negotiations because you don't want your business to be bombed. So of course, there'll be two competing sides. There'll be someone that's one side in Iran that's more interested in negotiations than the other. But ultimately, I don't think it'll be enough to fracture the country in any way. It's it is actually good that there's there are people that are willing to negotiate into Iran, and I think it's good for their backbone that there are people who don't want these negotiations because it lowers the pressure to capitulate.
The only thing we can do is to try and put so much pressure and pain on the West, meaning we'll have to drag this out for a long time until all these compounding effects I mentioned start to fall in on them. And so there's some real complications inside. What there isn't, at least I've not seen any evidence, is any kind of genuine political force that says, hey, I'm against all of y'all and I want the thing to fall so that we can do something else and surrender to the West. I don't think that's even impossible.
Yeah. It's just a disagreement on approach. It doesn't mean you want the regime gone. It's not type of disagreement that would overthrow the regime, like dissatisfaction with negotiations. Anyway, let's have a little bit look about Israel's image in the world.
World leaders are beginning to completely turn on Israel, from Poland to Turkey to South Korea, Japan. I mean, even Asian nations are jumping in on this too. European nations, Spain, Italy, Germany even, which is something else, because Germany usually just gives Israel a complete pass for anything and everything, feeling like it cannot criticize, should not criticize. Oh, but they're starting to criticize. Let's start off with Poland. A Polish MP displayed the Israeli flag, but the Israeli flag looks a little bit different.
Yeah, this is
Watch
a little
this.
shocking.
Poles are already feeling Israel's attacks in the Middle East through fuel prices. But how do children feel it when dozens of times more have died than in the entire war in Ukraine? It's because the Jews are using a forbidden phosphorus bomb, which depletes oxygen from the air and leads to their death by suffocation. More, the smoke from this bomb gets into the lungs and burns them from within. They suffocate and burn from the inside at the same time. Tens of thousands of women and children. But if some child is lucky and doesn't suffocate, white phosphorus will stick to their cheek, to their hand, and burns through the tissues right down to the bone. It cannot be extinguished, so the cheek must be cut off, the hand amputated. Israel is committing, right before our very eyes, a genocide of truly horrific and exceptional cruelty. Israel is the new Third Reich, and its flag should look exactly like that. Oh! Thank you so much.
Okay. That's different from the Israeli flag I know.
What's interesting is that people in the crowd, the rest of the MPs, didn't gasp in shock when they saw that. They instead sat there and they looked at it, and then they seemed to cheer. So people are feeling like, yes, Israel is acting like
The tides of opinions are really turning against Israel. I don't think there's any going back.
Nazis. Here's Turkey. Erdogan compares Bibi to Hitler.
Israel's stalling and deception should not be given any more credit. In the absence of the implementation of UN Security Council Resolution number 2735, coercive measures against Israel should be put on the agenda. Israel's behavior has once again demonstrated that it is imperative for the international community to develop a
Israel is in trouble also because, Orban, the Hungarian prime minister that was recently deposed, in an election, he lost the election just last weekend. He was a big Israel defender. He voted, he was the one who kept the EU from imposing sanctions against Israel, from doing various actions against Israel. And he was one dissenting voice on that. With him gone, Israel has lost its protector in Europe. It's going to get really fucked.
protection mechanism for Palestinian civilians. 70 years ago, just as Hitler was stopped by an alliance of humanity, Netanyahu and his murder network must be...
Yeah, so basically you have world leaders making statements against Israel, very popular with pretty much everyone that's has common sense that Israel is doing bad things and is fucking over the world by getting the U.S. start this war. But this was one other funny part.
Who are expected to be present.
Watch this.
This is, I think this is an Indian newscast show.
Again, we dubbed this for you, but Japanese TV
Japanese
points out Jared Kushner, and they're like, now, why is Jared Kushner even involved at all in these peace talks? Watch this.
Here are
yeah. So just want the segment because what the fuck were Witkoff and Kushner doing at these negotiations? They're the ones who twice betrayed Iran and had negotiations and then the United States bombs Iran during the negotiations. They're not trusted by Iran. Their presence just hinders everything. Why are they still being sent to negotiations?
The individuals who are expected to be present. First, on the American side, we have Special Envoy Witkoff, who has been involved in negotiations with Iran, Mr. Kushner, President Trump's son-in-law, and Vice President Vance, who is said to have opposed intervention in Iran. Meanwhile, from the Iranian side, we anticipate Speaker of Parliament Ghalibaf, the former commander of the Revolutionary Guard, and Foreign Minister Araghchi.
Well, in these two countries.
And then, I have a very straightforward question. If you could enlighten me about Mr. Kushner, who is among the American delegation attendees. By what authority is he there? What exactly is this person? Trump's, his son-in-law. So, in other words, is he participating as a representative of the Trump family? That's the only way it appears to me. And what's more, he's Jewish, isn't he? So,
yes, he is. Yes, he is.
In these discussions with Iran, I actually get the feeling that it might be better if some people weren't even involved. I've always wondered who this person is, coming in with the title of son-in-law in such a position.
I like how the dubbing kind of suddenly went to an Australian accent, but what?
Yes, that was funny. But yeah, it just showcases to show that Japan and other places are like, what the fuck is the United States doing? And why is the Trump's Jewish son-in-law involved in these negotiations, despite having absolutely no expertise in anything? And second, just highlight the fact that Witkoff and Kushner should not have been there, have been at those negotiations. Anyway, we now have confirmation of how Iran was so precise with their missiles and drones.
Put it up here on the screen. Iran has used Chinese spy satellites to target U.S. bases. They say leaked documents show IRGC secretly acquired systems and used it to guide strikes during the war in March. Iran secretly acquired this Chinese spy satellite, gave the Islamic Republic a powerful new capability to target U.S. military bases.
So they actually bought this satellite outright from the Chinese. It's not like they're just using Chinese network. They own a Chinese spy satellite that they can use for anything they want. And they used it to spy on all U.S. bases and direct all their airstrikes. And that answers the question of how they were so accurate.
The leaked Iranian military documents show the satellite known as the TEE-01B was acquired by the IRGC's Aerospace Force in late 2024 after it was launched into space from China. The timestamp coordinate list, satellite imagery, and orbital analysis show that the Iranian military commanders tasked the satellite to monitor key U.S. military sites, and the images were taken in March before and after drone missile strikes on those locations. And actually, you could see some of the battle damage assessment and stuff that being used by the Iranians. They say that the satellite was built and launched by Earth Eye company, that's a Chinese company, that says it offers in-orbit delivery, aka it's like a SpaceX-style competitor, and a little-known export model under which spacecraft launched in China are then transferred to overseas customers after reaching orbit. I do think that this is an incredibly significant and important piece of news. Obviously, it was
so Iran has a spy satellite for their exclusive use.
Long speculated there was some sharing. This effectively amounts to sharing, maybe they paid for it, maybe they didn't. It was some sort of deal, but it does demonstrate, the real asymmetry of the problem for U.S. adversaries. Because if we're looking here at Iran, this is Iran, which just has ballistic missiles. Another nuclear armed power, rogue state, which threatens the United States, is called North Korea, which happens to be a very close ally of China.
Oh, they most, after this, if they don't already have a Chinese spy satellite, they have one now, after seeing how effective it was for Iran. Guarantee you that not just North Korea, but any adversarial, any place with adversarial ambitions towards the United States is going to be acquiring these spy satellites.
And so you have to ask then, it's like
Afghanistan might be beyond their wealth and capability right now, but they definitely would want one, for example.
Well, does North Korea have the same targeting capacity? And I think it just demonstrates the level playing field that any adversary in the future will have, in the same way that the United States would arm the Mujahideen in Afghanistan to try and take down the Soviet Union, or we would use a considerable force of our empire. It doesn't take much to actually reveal the vulnerabilities that we have. So massively significant piece of news.
Yeah, and it's also just significant as we try to claim, how close is this to being a proxy war between the U.S. and China at a time when we're already obviously engaged in a proxy war, the U.S. versus...
Well, it's a proxy war both between Russia and China are involved in Iran against the United States. So it's a two-sided proxy war.
Russia via Ukraine. And so this is another indicator. It also demonstrates the way in which, or some of the capacity Iran has, why they were able to do so much damage to 13 of our bases in the region, significant enough that they were rendered uninhabitable, allegedly. And so our service members were.
And on the topic of proxy wars, this is an interesting little thing that happened with regard to Russia.
Now, that's Naryshkin. But there have been other things that the Russians have also been saying. The Russians have released information, both the defense ministry and Medvedev, the vice chairman of Russia's Security Council. They have been saying that essentially Ukrainian drone production is no longer taking place on the territory of Ukraine. It is increasingly taking place in Europe, that the Europeans are producing the various drones.
It's because when it happens in Ukraine, Russia just bombs the hell out of whatever factory is manufacturing the drones. And so it's no longer happening in Ukraine because Russia has shut it down. But attacking NATO state is a little different story. So
the Russian Defense Ministry published a list of where all the factories and workshops are now located.
A list of targets.
And, well, Medvedev then followed up with a comment telling the Europeans, be very, very careful. We basically know where all your factories are. We're in a position to take counteraction. We reserve the right to take counteraction at such time as we decide that we should. Now,
so there is a very real possibility that what's going on in Ukraine escalates to something beyond Ukraine. You have Estonia and Latvia, Lithuania, letting Ukraine use their airspace to attack Russia. So you have drones, supposedly Ukrainian drones, coming out of Estonia, Latvia, and then bombing. I think another place they bombed up here is Port Up Here, oil infrastructure. These are small drones, so they don't do big damage, but they can still be. It still can cause a lot of problems, and it creates bad optics of smoke coming out of Russian ports, and potentially can also kill civilians. It's something that really annoys the Russians, and so these NATO members here letting Ukraine use their airspace to send drones, big problem. And Belarus is a Russian ally, so Ukraine can't send the drones through Belarus. So you have to believe that either A, Ukraine is sending its drones all the way around this way to attack Russia, or B, Ukraine just launches the drones from here, and then or somewhere in these three countries and shoots them into Russia that way, and that would make them direct participants in the war. I suspect it might be the latter, because this is they can send a lot more drones if they launch them from here than if they launch them from here, especially if these drones aren't even being produced in Ukraine. If they're being produced in Poland, Germany, or something, just be shipped here directly. So it's between using the airspace here to attack Russia and the fact that NATO members over here are making drones that are then being sent deep into Russia to bomb oil refineries and power stations and whatever. It's Russia. NATO is practically already at war with Russia, and it's just this thin veneer of it only being Ukraine. And Russia might just get fed up with it and just, start. It knows a factory right here has produced drones that's killing Russians and destroying Russian property. Might just send a missile and destroy that factory, as an example. It'd be an attack on a NATO state, and what would happen next? Well, the United States is stretched badly with the Iran war, so the United States is the backbone of NATO's military. So if the United States is severely distracted and exhausted by the Iran conflict, might be the opportunity that Russia said, okay, they don't have military deterrent anymore. Let's just bomb the hell out of the factories that are making these drones and attacking us. I'm sure there is a faction in Moscow that wants to do that. Whether it happens or not, I don't know, but it's a risk that's out there.
There's been minimal reporting of any of this in the media in the West. And it's clear that some of the drones that are being fabricated in Europe are being used by the Ukrainians to conduct drone strikes inside Russia itself. Now, remember how just a few months ago, at the end of last year, there was a huge fuss in Europe about the fact that a small number of Russian drones had reached European territory, had entered the territory of Poland, to be precise. There was an awful lot of talk about that. There was speculation that the drones might have been blown in that direction by the wind. The Russians made it fairly clear that they believed that the Ukrainians were behind the whole incident.
I do too.
There was a flurry of stories about Russian drones operating over the skies over Denmark and other places. I have to say,
That might have been the incident used as a pretext to start drone production in other EU countries, possibly.
that it now looks to me as all of this rhetoric, this completely artificial story, was whipped up in order to justify drone production in Europe, with the Europeans supplying drones to the Ukrainians to conduct strikes inside Russia. That's, I must say, how it looks to me. Now, it should be said immediately that in military industrial terms, this is a confession of weakness. Earlier in the war, the Europeans supplied Ukraine with tanks, armored vehicles, air defense missiles.
Things that can be used within the war in Ukraine. That you have tanks that are not going to be going into Russia. The tanks are going to be fighting in the Ukraine. But the drones to attack Russia, it's because they've run out of tanks and artillery and other things to send that could help the Ukrainian front line. So they're doing these cheap drones to harass the Russians instead.
Fighter jets, all sorts of heavy weapons. They still supply the Ukrainians with some of these things. The Germans have just done so.
But just last night, Russia sent 1,000 drones into Ukraine and bombed the shit out of them everywhere in like 3 waves of attack. It's there's a huge imbalance. Ukraine is getting absolutely demolished.
But in ever diminishing, dwindling quantities. They've turned instead to drones, and I am going to suggest that all of the recent narrative, the talk that we have been seeing in the West, in the Western media over the last few months about the decisive nature of drone warfare, the way that the drones have stopped the Russians in their tracks, all of that is itself a product of this military production crisis in Europe and in the West.
Yep.
Because the Europeans can only supply drones now in quantity to the Ukrainians, they obviously have a massive incentive to talk up their importance. Just say.
Yep. So that's that story.
Is there so little popular opposition to this war up to now? You were there in Congress. I remember you, by the way, at the time, organizing opposition.
So this had some interesting sections, like exhaustive Tomahawk supply.
As you pointed out, there is an ongoing request for an additional $200 billion for a supplemental appropriation for the Iran war. Now, why would that be? First of all, the U.S. has already exhausted its supply of Tomahawk missiles. They've basically cleaned out the entire inventory of munitions and need this additional appropriation to keep the war going. Will Congress approve it? At this point, I don't see any evidence that to the contrary, because Congress could have stopped the war in its tracks by passing a resolution denying any funds at all. Congress could...
No, Congress isn't going to do that. Deep State wanted this war and wants to continue this war. So, yeah, Congress is passing whatever funding is needed.
Stop the war in its tracks by disapproving the $200 billion. We'll see what happens with that. In addition to that, the president has requested $1.5 trillion just for the military in the 2027 budget. That constitutes at least 80% of the discretionary spending of the United States. So the U.S. is increasingly becoming a militarized society.
So 80% of the federal budget is being spent on the military. As American, is that what you want? To fight a war in Iran on the USA world that has jack shit to do with you on the behalf of Israel?
Because if you militarize the budget, you militarize the society. And the president a couple of weeks ago, as some people who are watching are aware, basically said, hey, it's, I'll paraphrase, we can't be funding Medicare, Medicaid, and childcare. That's for the states to worry about. We have to fund our military. So
I was just thinking about long-term holders of gold selling off and buying oil again and then going back. Just wondering exactly when that theoretic thing would happen, because it seems like it would be a phenomenon, me sitting and wondering as a non-institutional investor. Well, the problem with that, it's not easy to invest in oil. You need a tanker. When it was actually being done at some points, for example, in 2008, when oil spiked above 100, there was, for a brief time, all these investors had bought tankers and then were storing oil in tankers. The point is, it's more complicated. It's fairly complicated to oil. And talking about the physical good, because if you're talking about a real holder of gold, like physical gold, then yes, it's holding gold has its own storage problems too. You have to work out where you're going to do that and how you're going to do that. And when you've invested into investing in gold, when you've figured out how you're holding it, which bank, Switzerland, whatever, selling it and then going back, it is buying an oil tanker, filling it with oil, and having it languish on the sea in the hopes that oil prices go up, and so you can then sell that and go back into gold. It's complicated. I don't think some people might, but it won't be a big rush. And then that's talking about people that actually own physical gold. If you're talking about someone who owns paper gold, like something like GLD, well, GLD has no impact on actual gold, the actual physical price of gold. That's established back in 2008. GLD uses derivatives. So you pour as much money as you want into GLD, it won't boost physical gold prices. And you take as much money as you want out of GLD, it won't change physical gold prices. It's all paper. And if you're talking about the type of investor that's investing in paper gold, you know what they're going to do? They're going to sell their paper gold and buy paper oil. They're going to buy, I forget the ETF that tracks oil. And that has zero impact on the physical oil or physical gold supply. Zero impact on real prices. It's all just paper being shuffled around in the huge bucket shop that is Wall Street. So I don't think there may be some savvy investors that own physical gold that see an opportunity, or maybe saw an opportunity in the past, sold their physical gold and bought oil, and will switch back into gold later. That is possible, but it's complicated to do that, and I don't think it'll be a huge number of people that does do it.
The U.S. is becoming this armed encampment in the world. It's extending itself. It's growing in this empire ambition. And frankly, it's going to run into a brick wall, because you cannot ignore these economic forces. And what's happening, as you point out, inflation, the inflationary knock-on effect of this war. We're affecting the supply of oil. Price of oil will keep climbing. We're affecting supplies that are needed, as you pointed out, for agriculture, fertilizer, and it should be mentioned that family farms are failing in the U.S. because of markets being rigged by big agriculture.
Okay, let's look into why there's so little public opposition to all this.
A political pushback that will come in the midterm elections.
Mm. Yeah, the pushback, I think, yes, it will come into the midterm elections. That's where the real pushback will be. I don't think Trump will be under, he'll be under some pressure from Congress to end this war, but the real pressure starts, his real issues start after the midterms.
Why is the...
Including probably impeachment.
So little popular opposition to this war up to now. You were there in Congress. I remember you, by the way, at the time, organizing opposition in Congress against the war in Iraq. You weren't the majority, but you were a voice that people heard. We heard you in Britain. In Britain, anywhere between 500,000, according to the police, or many more, millions of people protested in London against the war against Iraq. Iraq was a very brutal, very violent dictatorship. It had a history of violent aggression against its neighbors. It was in some ways a more obvious target for attack, you could argue, than Iran is.
It was a more obvious target of attack in some ways. And there was the lies about weapon of mass destructions.
Which has not had a history that is quite so bad, at least so it seems to me. And yet, people protested against Iraq, the war in Iraq, rightly so, in my opinion. People are not protesting in the same way against the war in Iran, despite the fact that it's going to affect them personally in a way that the war in Iraq against Iraq never did.
Well, one of the factors, and I
think the protesters and the propaganda around the protesters and the 30, 40, 50, 60, whatever number they're at nowadays of dead protesters, that's propaganda. It helped give some legitimacy to this attacking Iran. It's one reason, Asmongold, for example, one of the reasons he was positive about Trump attacking Iran. And it might have had some influence on limiting demonstrations, I think.
Harken back to my own college days. One of the factors is suppression of dissent on campus. So much so that people who would challenge the U.S. policy with respect to Israel and becoming involved with Israel's genocidal policy through subsidizing Israel. You do that on campus, you could be expelled, suspended, lose your scholarship.
Yeah, that's true. I think they've instituted a lot more controls, like Israel protection controls on campuses. And I know that the Iraq War, a big part of the protesters came from colleges, college students. And if you don't have the ability to rally college students to protest, it severely limits what protests you can do against the Iran war.
Universities have been bludgeoned into submission, so much so that they become the police that enforce any dissent. So that's one factor. However, I see this as just temporary. Keep in mind that a few weeks ago,
I'd have another reason, another huge reason there weren't protests against this Iran war that I just thought of. The Iraq war, we all knew was coming for like a year. There was a troop buildup. There was Trump making his case, getting an authorization from Congress, whatever. All that didn't happen with Iran. Iran there was active negotiations going. Why would you protest against a war when Trump has not actually started that war yet? There's negotiations. Why? Then poof, suddenly we bombed the Supreme Leader and we're in the war. There was no opportunity to protest this Iran war. No thing where the United States had decided this war and everyone knew that, and they could go out to campus and say, United States is going into this war. We need to protest to try to stop it. That dynamic, which was with the Iraq war, was Bush intends to go to war. We should protest, try to change his mind. There was no opportunity to change Trump's mind. He was negotiating, and you can't protest against negotiations. And then he did a surprise attack without authorization from Congress, with no warning. There wasn't like months of it's obvious to everyone we're going to attack Iran. That didn't happen. So that's another reason there was not major protest against this Iran war. If Trump had tried to do what Bush had done and get authorization from Congress and build up public support for this war, then yes, we would have seen protests, anti-Iran war protests.
The aegis of a group called No Kings.
Mm-hmm.
There are 9 million people in hundreds of cities across the United States protesting the Trump administration generally, but many were protesting the war specifically. So there is a percolating dissent. And it's coming from a couple different quarters. It's coming from economics, people feeling this pressure. It's coming from a feeling that this authoritarian, even fascist administration in Washington is out of control. And people, Americans generally have an innate concern about this idea of control, being controlled. It might be forgotten at times, but when you go deeper, Americans will resist. And when you wake up that resistance, it is a force that will change the government. This government is in peril, as far as I can see. It's
already dead. Trump administration died when he bombed the Supreme Leader. All this left play out is exactly the route that happens. Will he escalate in the Middle East and destroy the entire Middle East, and that finishes him politically, or will the strait remain closed for 6 months and the fallout from that destroy Trump? Or will Israel use nukes and the fallout from that destroy Trump? Those are the three main options I see at this point in time, but they all end in the destruction of the Trump presidency.
Uneasy rests the crown on this particular self-proclaimed king, because there is this dissent stirring. It will affect midterm elections, but it will continue to grow. And as this war continues, and I don't see anything that will stop it from continuing in many different manifestations, whether it's a blockade, further bombing, which makes no sense, or even attempt to...
This war is continuing.
Incursions that would be infantry. Or naval, so you've got Air Force, infantry, naval. There might be different things, including attempts at interrupting technology through cyber warfare. Whatever happens here, they're not going to defeat Iran. It's not going to happen. This is like a fantasy. This was Netanyahu looking to destroy Iran, to claim a victory, to put himself in, get reelected, and he can prove how tough he is. The U.S. had no interest in this at all. This thing about...
that's a good chance that, yes, Netanyahu did it for his political ambitions, because he's in trouble politically because of corruption accusations back in Israel. And so this wag the dog, start this war to secure the next election. And the war went worse than you could possibly have imagined.
About a nuclear weapon is baloney. It's like harkens back to the phony claims of weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. That trope has already been used. So where does it go? I'm thinking that the war may continue. Public opposition will rise, and when it does, it's going to be brutal for the.
In my personal opinion, 5 or 6 months total time the Strait of Hormuz and the war goes on. Just my wingboat, because that is what Iran needs to accomplish its primary objectives of regime changing Trump, of getting him impeached. Hold the Strait of Hormuz closed 6 months. I say 5, it would probably accomplish it too. And at that point, they're ready to negotiate, and they've gotten what they really want. And then by that time, also the pressure on the world because of the closure of Strait of Hormuz was be so intense. I mean, right now it's pain. It's just pain from Strait of Hormuz being closed. But that the type of pain that in another month it'll be a completely different order. It's like let's say sitting on acorns isn't very comfortable, but sitting on barbed wire is a lot worse than that. Right now it's sitting on acorns, and in a month it's going to be sitting on barbed wire fence in terms of the amount of pain countries are going through. And that there's going to be pressure to end this war as we get into the summer, probably late summer.
Republicans in the midterm, and Trump could very well see himself impeached and removed in the next Congress.
Mm. Are there any off-ramps? Is there any possible diplomatic route towards
the answer? No.
Off-ramps. One of the things that I remember, again, from the 1960s, is that one of the strange facts about the war...
There was an off-ramp. Even the faintest off-ramp, I wouldn't be saying that the Trump presidency is finished.
In Vietnam, is that even though it caused a very terrible war, enormous loss of life, in some ways, the big international situation, if you like, the relationship between the great powers of the era, the United States, the Soviet Union, China, actually improved. There was the meeting between Johnson and Kosygin in Glassboro. There was détente that followed. There was the arms control treaties of that era. There was a general stabilization of the situation in Europe. And of course, there was the opening to China and Nixon's visit to China. I don't get the sense that that is true this time, that on the contrary, the relations are actually getting worse. Can you speak to that?
Yes, and you're correct. And here's why you're correct. The Trump administration has pursued this fantasy that it is still a unipolar world. It is.
Yes, this is an underlying problem, and Trump is not to blame for this one, because it's the same misconception that Asmongold is laboring under, that the United States is still a superpower, that it can do whatever the fuck it wants without consequence, and that if we start a war with Iran, of course we're going to win. Why even think about it? How could we possibly lose against a country like Iran? And it's that thinking that led Trump to okay the bombing Supreme Leader. I mean, we're the United States. What's Iran going to do even if we bomb the Supreme Leader? Without understanding the implication of a Strait of Hormuz closing. Neither Trump nor Asmongold thought about that. Gave it the slightest thought. I have the video from the day Trump bombed Iran. Asmongold was like, "I'm so happy." He didn't have it. He didn't. Strait of Hormuz wasn't even on his mind. He didn't even give it the tiniest thought. The thing that's going to crash the entire global economy. Asmongold wasn't even aware of it or thinking about it at all. Yeah, that is one reason we're in this world. We think the U.S. is a superpower that can do anything, and we completely ignoring realities like the possibility of the Strait of Hormuz closing.
It's not. The United States is no longer at the apex of everything that happens in the world. The world is much more interconnected and interdependent than Mr. Trump would have us believe. The United States' efforts to impress tariffs on various countries, which
people don't realize anything when it comes to economy or currency. Scary, to be honest. You can't entirely fault them because the mainstream media doesn't address these things. The media didn't spell out to everyone what the closure of Strait of Hormuz would do to the world economy before this Iran war, or warn people. Alternative media did, but not mainstream media. Mainstream media was all on board with pro-war. And mainstream media, yes, it's declined. There's now a real alternative media, but it still has really wide reach. And more than half population still get their news from mainstream media. And it's... everyone needs to wake up and have their own wake up moment, realizing how much they've been lied to before. Mainstream media needs to collapse a lot more before more people wake up.
Eventually fell apart, and people are looking for refunds now. But that was an example of this idea of America ruling over everyone. The idea we're going to grab Greenland, the move into Venezuela, the threat to Canada, the threat to the Pope. I mean, this is all a party of.
And Trump, with Trump ego, of course, and his idea of making America great again, he's trying to make America by just pure willpower back into the absolute behemoth it used to be. That is his ego. And he's trying to act like that on the world stage. And as part of all that, he started his stupid Iran war and ended his presidency, because you can't wishful thinking America back into greatness. You can, making America great again should have been a slogan that you aim towards, a goal, an aspiration. It shouldn't have been a delusion that you actually try to live by and end up completely fucking over the world. Okay. I think that's enough for today. Like and subscribe. Come watch on Kick or Twitch. And I'll see you in the next video. Bye.